Hello and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast for our third out of four divisional round game previews. And this time it's a turn of the Texans traveling to the Kansas City Chiefs. I am, as ever, your host, Andy Davis. With me, I've got two returning guests. Our first guest making a long overdue return. Back with us today is Chiefs fan Dave Figgins. Dave, how are things? How are you?
Yeah, I'm great, man. It has been a long time coming, so I'm pretty excited to just get back into it.
Well, you've not been on for a while, but Graham, our next guest, was on last week. So, Graham, good to have you back on.
Good to see you again. You probably didn't think I was going to be sitting here this week.
Absolutely not.
It was a nice surprise.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of the shocks of the weekend. I think you think about even how the first half sort of switched between and the second half. I think there was a point in the first half where I don't think anything was going right for you guys, and then there was I remember vividly. I talked about it in the review of the wildcard round with Michael McQuaid. There was a point where it was around the 5-10 yard line, your own 5-10 yard line. I think it was something like 3rd and 16. Stroud finds that pass to Hutchinson. And I think ever since that point, it just completely flicked the switch. There was a Derek Stingley interception. And I feel like that game just completely turned and went from, being a seemed for a little while and not your day to then suddenly you were 10, 12 points up and out of reach for the Chargers. So, yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with that. I mean, I think the O-line was held up well. I think we talked about a lot when you came on last week, Graham, about, how we thought there might be a problem against his Chargers defenses, the O-line, but Stroud seemed pretty well protected. And Stroud, we saw last year the same thing happen in terms of they were sort of the underdogs in that wildcard game, and they go out and win that game, and everyone started talking about Stroud then. So for me, it was a great performance. A few, Graham, must have been just fantastic as a Texans fan yourself.
Yeah, well, you nailed it when we seen that. Muff snap and Stroud picked it up and he made that big gainer at Hutch. There was a huge momentum shift in that, but another thing that happened was Stroud was using his legs a lot more in the game. You'll have noticed, he must have been watching how the Bills have been doing it, how the Ravens have been doing it, and how the Chiefs have been doing it. There's all these situations where sometimes the quarterback just has to get out of that pocket and he has to gain you that hard yards, and he did it. And we've seen glimpses of last season's CJ Stroud. I wouldn't say he's fully back on that, but yeah, it was good to see the momentum shift, and the defense really played their part hugely. They were awesome at the weekend, caused a lot of pressure and forced a lot of picks. He had more picks in the game than he has all season. So that just goes to show you how well they stepped up. And unusual for you, Andy, you've got two teams who were on a bye week last week. Well, it was the Chargers bye last week, and they just said bye-bye. So it'll be good to get going at the Chiefs. Be a really tough game. Can't take nothing away from them. Some of their starters have had a bit of a rest. I think it's been a few weeks they've been resting out now, so let's see how they come out.
Yeah, David, I mean, for you guys, it's been a very relaxed couple of weeks. I mean, it didn't matter because we lost, but it didn't really help us out when you played the Broncos. That obviously, but I think that was for the benefit of your team. I did think maybe after how we helped you out in 2019, I thought maybe you may have had more desire to win the game, to stop your division rival getting in, and what we did to the Patriots to help them, or to you in 2019, I thought maybe they might take the game more seriously, but I think, quite rightly, I think they took the game, took the most important thing first, which was, team health, and, didn't play any starters I can think of. But it must be quite nice for you, David, just, after, from the early stages as a fan, seeing a team struggle sometimes to make the playoffs, and then when you get to the playoffs, ultimately lose. I think about the Titans game with Mariota a few years ago, before you drafted Mahomes, and it must be nice having not only the playoff game sort of not even playing in it, but also really week 18 you weren't really playing in it either. You weren't really playing your first team, so yeah, it must be quite nice just observing it from having a backseat and just almost having a relaxed fortnight.
Yeah, it's been really nice going back throughout the history. So I've been a fan for about 14, 15 years now of the Chiefs. So I've seen some god awful quarterbacks in Kansas City. Right through to when Andy Reid took over and we started to chip away at the playoffs and we're winning AFC West division titles, and then we were getting games like that Titans game, and then the Colts game where they had that record comeback, and the Steelers game where they beat us without scoring a touchdown. It's just night and day, to be honest, to see that. But it really is great to see that progression that's come along, particularly since Andy Reid took over. And then these last couple of weeks have been quite chilled out. And this is where I'm probably sounding a little bit pig-headed now as a Chiefs fan because I've been spoiled a little bit. This is where our season begins, to be honest. I sound a little bit like Nick Wright. That I think they kind of not coursed, but they leave a little bit behind. They leave a little bit in the back pocket just for this part of the season, particularly in the later stages. So yeah, it has been nice watching our seconds and thirds get crushed by Denver wasn't nice, but but it's been nice to let them rest up because our bye week was in week 5, I think. So it was like really, really early on. So it's nice for them to have had that. But then obviously you have the rest versus rust argument come in. It's been 24 days since they played a game. They have done some pads in some padded contact in training, but obviously that doesn't really replicate what it's like for a playoff, particularly a playoff game, never mind an NFL game. So, but yeah, as a fan, it's been really nice and relaxing to watch. The slate of games last week was great. I thought CJ was incredible, particularly after that muffed snap, and it's gonna, I think it's gonna be an interesting game.
Yeah, you mentioned then about sort of having something in the back pocket, and that almost, in fact, you haven't been that great, I don't think, personally, but if you're 15-2, and I think that's the most important thing, I think, to take away from this season so far, does that almost give you more confidence, the fact that you are 15-2 without really playing well? Just imagine what you could do if you did play well. Does that sort of, bring you confidence?
Yeah, I think not only that the Chiefs have grown into this season as well. They're kind of in a different way to last season, because last season they were not playing well and losing games. I think they went on a run where they lost 4 out of 5, and then finished as the 3rd seed, and obviously had to go on the road twice to get to the Super Bowl. But this year they've obviously been finding ways to win. The defense has been incredible this year, particularly the run defense, and that bodes well for when you've got teams that have got great running backs or that are having good seasons as running backs, like Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon's probably a prime example of that. Derrick Henry, just running backs that have had decent seasons and not been decent against us because we've been able to stuff the run. In the latter ends of the season, I think it might have even been from the Texans game onwards, or maybe a little bit before that. Hollywood Brown's come back. We've had Noah Gray getting a lot more snaps. Travis Kelce's been coming back into his own, even though he's not been a major contributor at the start of the season. And then I think they're just starting to get these little idiosyncrasies, particularly with the younger members of the team. So, and then obviously DeAndre Hopkins has come in as well, and initially he has contributed right from the off, but it's sort of been incremental. So he's been more common. He's been more of a heavy contributor in the later weeks, and I think Xavier Worthy's been again another player that's grown into the season. So I think particularly on offense, we've grown into the season, and I think that will be something that will continue to grow into the playoffs, and that's something that we see from from this Chiefs team for the last 3 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, you think about really how the last season ended. You think about the particular one I think of most is that Christmas Day loss to the Raiders, and there was a lot of talk about it from fans saying they weren't going to win a playoff game or they weren't going to be the same team, and they go on and, go on and win it. And whilst I don't think, maybe they're as good anymore, I do still feel like they would lose next week if they won. But at the same time, you can't fault it, really. You can't fault the season you've had because, it's we think about some teams, have these amazing performances and they don't make the playoffs. I think there's that classic story of the Chargers having the number one offense and number one defense. I think it was in 2010 and didn't make the playoffs at all. So for them, I think they, flipped that onto your sort of season where you are, not playing well at all near that record. I think it's it just shows winning football's like. And I think at the end of the day, it just shows the most important thing is to win games. But I still do think that you need something more, I think, to win a Super Bowl. I do think that whilst, it's been, an amazing season to have that record, the good teams you played, I mean, you lost to the Bills. And I do feel like, you go up against a good team like the Ravens or Bills next week. I think that presents an almighty challenge for you. So I think, but Steve Spagnuolo, I think the defense there he can make things happen there. I think that's what won you the Super Bowl last year, and I think that'll be what you'll need again. I think this year to do that. And I think against the Texans, a team that is lacking in the receivers with the injuries that you've had, I think you've got to just be very wary of that. The fact that this team is gonna, it's one thing doing well against the Chargers, but I think with the Chiefs and the defense like they've got, that must be sort of your number one aim is to sort of handle that.
Yeah, well, I kind of think we're kind of having a throwback to maybe last season for the Texans in regards to who we play and when. If you think back to when we played the Browns at NRG last season, in the regular season, the Browns come in and they handled us pretty easily in that game. And when you look back to the Chiefs game just a few weeks ago, the same can be said. There was different factors in that game. I think the Dell injury proved to be something that maybe CJ didn't quite overcome in that game. Yes, the Chiefs were good in the game, but I don't think that's the best Chiefs I've seen against the Texans, in recent memory. There was opportunities in that game. But when we played the Browns a few weeks later, they hadn't quite seen all our hand, so to speak. So when we did show them all our hand, we won comfortably in that game. And I'm not saying that'll be the case in this one, but there's going to be a few things that the Chiefs haven't seen. Aziz didn't play in the first game, because he was on a suspension, and Harbaugh singled him out in the press conference after the game, saying that he wasn't quite prepared for the speed that he brought at the linebacker position. So there's things like that. Yeah, we're lacking a bit in the wide receiver room. We moved on from Johnson this week. We waived him and got picked up by the Ravens. But we've elevated Jared Wayne up from the practice squad now. So we're maybe a bit light in wide receiver, but as long as we can find ways to get Nico open, we should be okay. If we can impose our will and get the run game going this time, there's a good chance that Mixon can help steady that. But if we use the dynamic that we did last week and let CJ use his legs when he needs to, that always adds that other element to how the defense schemes up against you. It's not just going to be Mixon running up the middle for 2 yards. It could be CJ popping out and gaining 8, with a slide or something. But really, there's a lot going to have to go right for the Texans. Let's not sugarcoat it. There's a lot going to have to go right. Cade Stover was put on IR this week, who I believe has been our tight end 1 all season. So Dalton Schultz is actually going to have to be the Dalton Schultz that we thought we were paying for last year. He's going to have to do something, come up big. But again, it all falls back on just how well our defense can contain Patrick Mahomes. You know, if you pressure him, don't let him get outside the pocket, because we've all seen how he scrambles, you know, and he's got one of the best fake slides in the game. So that's always good for another 5-6 yards. He might have second thoughts seeing Aziz back there after what happened with old Trevor Lawrence. But yeah, it's going to be how well our defense can contain, and there'll be one-on-one matchups. You know, will Stingley and Lassiter be able to win their battles on the back end? So yeah, it's going to be a tough one. But hey, who knows how it's going to go? Cold will factor into this as well. It's going to be like when Miami went up there.
Hey now.
It is, you know, we're southern teams. We like it either hot or indoors. So, like I've seen a lot of the traveling Texans talking and getting advice about how to prepare for Arrowhead with it being so cold this weekend, and folk are telling them bring cardboard so you can put it under your feet, put cardboard down on the seats, you know, because the cold will get to you. So, if that's the fans, imagine what the guys out there are having to deal with. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of factors to this game, but I think it's actually going to be, I think it could not be as quite a shootout, but I think there's going to be a bit back and forward in this one. And who better to stop the dynasty than the team that probably helped create it when we crumbled in that playoff game a few years back. You know, we've got a stake in how you guys started.
Yeah, absolutely. The
catalyst, you know. So what better than to be the team to end it? So let's hope that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether to mention that game or not, because it must just bring back some, probably for you, David, of good memories, but for you, Graham, a lot of bad memories. Now, I will say, I think Fitzpatrick and Gesicki, I think, started it with their late touchdown in Boston to win it. Give you the second seed and end the Brady dynasty while we're there, and then start a new one. So I think, you know, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Gesicki, the Texans collapsing, in that wild card game. So I think Bill O'Brien's got a lot for the Chiefs to be thankful for. But it's been a good few years for the Chiefs, and I've literally forgotten what I was going to say now. That's good for me. But Ray, that must bring back some horrible memories, because it was a game. I remember I was actually in Lisbon at the time for my birthday. I remember watching that game and just being stunned about how it started and how it ended, and to go 24 points up and not win, and the way it collapsed. I know it's
it was before half as well.
Yeah,
so that was the insane thing.
I was so close to going to that game, and see, when I was watching it, I was like, oh man, I should have been there. And then when you see what happened, you're like, oh well,
maybe not.
I did go, but like I'm sitting in the bullpen just now, and it's like you're talking about Hopkins. I've got a Hopkins jersey in the back here, and just to the side of my hair, I've got a Justin Reed jersey as well. So it's like all these Texans are going on to. Well, especially Justin Reed, he's went on to be really well, and you can't not root for the guy because he was such a contributor for the team.
Yeah,
he's a good guy, and like I have no problem with Hop. Like the whole Hop situation was just one of those things. Everyone's calling this like the Hop revenge game, but I think everyone he wanted to get revenge on probably left the building. So can he maybe take it easy on us?
The thing as well, like I realise that the players that were at that game are probably all but gone now, and the coaching staff is different. Do you think that is any sort of at all on the players' minds? They want to get that revenge for what happened. They certainly on the owners' minds, I'm sure. But do you think that could help a little bit? I mean, I know that probably goes out the window when you're playing a team like the Chiefs. But do you think that will be on the players' minds? Just do not repeat what happened 5 years ago.
That's Graham's.
Yeah, Dave, you can put your sauce on that one.
I think that the Andy Reid model of coaching in terms of the playoffs will be the same thing no matter the opposition. So I don't think it might be mentioned in terms of there might be a few players that will want to get revenge and whatnot. But I think in terms of prep, it'll be exactly the same way it is every single season, because it's been a proven winning formula for the last however many years. And I think that's the way that they've got to attack it. Because if you give any sort of special significance to certain things, and you start overthinking things, that's when certain doubts can creep in. And then when you think about going back to that game, when it was 24-0, and when I was watching it, and I was thinking, oh my God, this is your typical Chiefs once again, typical playoff perennial losers again. But when the Chiefs started coming back into it, when they got the first touchdown, and then they got the fumble on the either a kickoff or a punt return, I can't remember which one it was. And then they scored the touchdown again from that. So when they chipped away with 2 touchdowns, everybody in the stadium, including, I assume, the Texans players, had the life sucked out of them, and it was just like it was inevitable. It's like everybody knew, and that I think that mode of never giving up, never thinking you're out of the game, no matter what, I think is the mode that they need to go into, rather than individual type of, oh, well, there might be certain players that might think this and think that. And I think if they just attack it like they do every other year, that's the mode that is obviously proven successful. So I think that's the way that they need to do it.
Yeah, I think there's 2 ways you can look at that, like that game as inspiration. You know, both teams can take something out of it. Like the Texans, maybe before leading up to this, they'll have things up reminding the players, look, this isn't happening again. You know, we're not going up there. This isn't happening. And they'll also take like the last game and all the bad things that happened with like Dell and all that stuff will be up there, and they'll be saying like, we haven't come here to lose, blah, blah, blah. But if the Texans find themselves winning that game, Andy Reid can turn around and go, look, guys, last time we were in a situation like this against these guys in the playoffs, this is what we did. You know, so there's fuel for both teams out of it, which is like the worst thing. You know, if it was only fuel for us, yeah, that's fine. You know, let it burn all night. But if you can fuel the other team, you're like, well, maybe not. So I just think it's got everything that everyone's going to want to see. It's got the capability of the high-powered offense, the Chiefs going up against high-caliber defense, the Texans. And like, I'm a defense guy, so when the Texans are playing lights out on defense, I'm ecstatic. Like last week, I'm like, that is like a game for me. Picks left, right, and center, sacks. You know, yeah. I'm just hoping for much and such the same. I'm pumped for it. Like I'm ready to go. Like I just want it on now.
I think it'll be a defense heavy game, to be honest. I think we've had problems in the O-line all season. And I think that they've obviously had 3 weeks to try and work stuff out, and they had Joe Tooney at left tackle, and they've obviously got a couple of decisions. I think they've been a bit cloak and dagger with that deliberately to not give the Texans as to what they're doing on the offensive line. And obviously the D line of the Texans is great in it. Will Anderson is scary. He's a scary dude, as is Danielle Hunter. So I think that's probably going to be where the battle might be won and lost. On the opposite side, though, as well, obviously, I think Chris Jones, again, scary dude. So personally, I think it'll be a low-scoring game, even though it was, what score was it last time? Like 27-19, I think. And I don't think it will be as high-scoring this time. I think it'll be probably not so much less, but a little bit less than that. And I think the defense will factor heavily in that. And I do think the Chiefs will get off to a slow start, primarily because they've not played for over 3 weeks. Not necessarily 24-0 slow start, but I do think they'll get off to a slow start. Might go behind, might not click on offense. and then obviously go into the game like they go into every season or like playoff game. So yeah, but I think defense is going to factor heavy in this game.
It's a game of the trenches.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's go on to our final segment, our score predictions. So, David, sticking with you, what is your score prediction for the game?
I've been conflicted about this because I knew I was going to get asked this question, and I really do rate this Texans team, but it depends which Texans team turns up, and it depends on how heavily the injuries factor, and then also depends on how quickly the Chiefs can get into the game as well. But obviously, Andy Reid's got prep time, and everyone knows when you give Andy Reid prep time, he's an absolute genius. So with that, I think it will be 24-17 to the Chiefs.
Wow, that is my exact same prediction. I also had 24-17. It sounds like I'm bottling my answer there, but I genuinely had 24-17 Chiefs before the episode started. So that is mad. But Graham, how are you seeing the game?
I've actually got 24-17, but the other way. Genuinely, that's why I started smirking there, because I was like,
"That's crazy."
Yeah, and like Dave said, but in this game, if the Chiefs start slow, the Texans have got to learn how to keep the gas on and put their foot on somebody's throat and kill them, and not look at the Lions game, But the Texans have been so good against good quarterbacks this year. If you look back through their record about who they've played, I think it was Kyle Brandt on Good Morning Football through the week did a segment on the Texans defense, and he talked about all the quarterbacks who've had the worst game of their career this season against the Texans, and it included Josh Allen, Jared Goff. He was saying it's like probably the worst game of their career they've had against this defense, but they haven't turned up every game, so let's just hope they can dial it up this weekend. 24-17.
I think you're bang on right. I think you have to sort of almost strike when you're on top, like you're saying. I think that D-line will have to sort of almost aim for a similar sort of start you made those 5 years ago, and even a start you made a little bit in the game of the week. So I think that's going to be the key to the game. I think if the Texans allow this Chiefs team to go 10, 17 points up by the midway point second quarter, I think you're looking at next to zero chance of making it. So, but we'll see. Of course, it is what seems like a routine now. The Texan slot at 3:30 p.m., which Graham made me aware of last week, which is I knew they had the record, but I didn't realize they called it a Texan slot. So when I saw they announced the times of the game, and I saw it was 3:30 Eastern, I was like, yeah, they've done it on purpose. They've done it again. So because I knew they would have. They always seem to have the 2-1 seeds play on a Saturday. I'm guessing to give them as a reward an extra day's rest for the next game. So I knew it would be one of the two slots this game. But it's funny they've once again gone for it. I'll be interested. I think if they do it again next week, I think it's definitely something they've planned out. But that is maybe we'll end the podcast for today. Our Texans against Chiefs preview. We've got just one game remaining, which is going to be the Eagles against the Rams, so keep an eye out for that one. But in the meantime, thank you both to Graham and David for coming on.
No problem.
Cheers.
Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. We'll be seeing one of you next week. You'll find out on Saturday who that's going to be. In the meantime, this has been the Across the Pond NFL podcast with your host, as ever, myself, Andy Davis, with our guests today in Graham and David. And we'll see you guys for Eagles against Rams. Take care.
See you later.